Radio Free 102.3 KJLH. Welcome to the front page, Saturday Town Hall edition. Our topic today, Pivot and Reinvent Black Business Post-Pandemic. And we are being joined by more distinguished guests. Phil Strong is joining us. He's production manager, audio engineer at Phil Enterprises. Good morning, Mr. Strong. He's also the president, by the way. Phil Strong, are you on the line? Okay, well, we will get him on the line shortly. I'm sure of that. We're also being joined by the chairman of the Black News Channel. It's an independent network that is minority owned and operated. Will be the nation's only 24/7 cable news programming dedicated to covering the African American perspective. He is also a former lawmaker and for many a household name. J.C. Watts, good morning.
Dominique, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Probably, this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, is one of the bigger news stories for any market, but certainly for the African American communities during the course of either of our lifetimes. Mr. Watts,
you cut out on me. I missed the second half of your question.
Well, I mean, it just seems like such a huge and impactful story, the situation, and even an era, the pandemic, not just for the African American community, but for the world, certainly hitting us harder, though.
Right, and no question, and I think that's been it's had a disproportionate impact on the African American community, and of course, we lead with the pandemic almost in most of our news programs, from Ladies First to DC Today to our news blocks in the morning and in the evening. Even before the pandemic hit.
Oh, have we lost Mr. Watts? Okay, it sounds like your phone went out for a moment.
I said when I was in Congress, Dominique, I worked with Harold Ford Jr., Jesse Jackson Jr., Donna Christensen, who was a medical doctor from the Virgin Islands, to highlight healthcare disparities. And so before the pandemic, you had healthcare disparities, and the pandemic, I think, has exposed why we thought it was important back in the mid-'90s to highlight the disparities, to try to bring some to the healthcare in that healthcare space. And so, yes, it's been it's created quite a bit of content for us at the Black News Channel. How it impacts African American businesses, how it impacts our community, and how it impacts us individually.
And certainly, I mean, the disparities are not just in healthcare. They've always been there in business as well. So that makes this, doubly a crisis for us as Black businesses. POC businesses in general are going to be challenged to even stay standing. I am worried that we'll wake up after in whatever the new normal is, and it will include many of the businesses that we rely on in our communities just simply disappearing. How much of that is about business owners becoming creative, pivoting, making changes, and how much of it is about policy changes that can benefit our communities?
Well, no question, African American. I'm on the African American business community is going to have to be. They are going to have to be a lot more creative, and I think I'm on the board of a HR software company, and they've got 2,200 employees on campus in Oklahoma City, and probably 2,150 of those employees. I think we're going to see a new environment once it's all said and done. In terms of working at home, how we deliver services, we've got to get more creative on those POC businesses. I don't think that this thing is going to go away overnight. And Dominique, you make a great point in bringing up the business when I've read that after the dust settles, we're probably going to see about, I've seen surveys, anywhere from 25 to 35% of the businesses that are currently in existence will probably go away. We've seen JCPenney, a national retailer, they filed bankruptcy, or Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which means they'll be reorganizing. That's going to impact a lot of employees. We've seen Neiman Marcus, a national retailer, they filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We're seeing things being closed down. So when these companies, when they downsize or if they don't survive, that's going to have an impact on a lot of African American businesses that may provide services, maybe.
Okay, it is 8:39 in the morning. I think they're great points. It feels like your phone is going out in and out. So let's see what we can do to fix that. And now I think we have physical distancing town hall broadcast. We will get it together. I think we would maybe benefit from having Phil Strong actually here in the building. I think we have the president of Phil Strong Enterprises back on the phone. Phil Strong, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi, how are you? Good morning.
Hi. Good. I'm glad you could check in. You know, being in production, I mean, you were anything in entertainment, right? Concerts, film, television, all of it, probably one of the hardest hit areas of business. And many, many people of color rely on these business models for our bread and butter. And, you know, in some cases for our opulent wealth. Where do we go from here? I mean, what happens to a business like yours?
So, you know, my business has predominantly been built on supporting the touring industry. I've been a production manager for concerts across the world for the last 20 years. It's going to be very difficult to pivot and to change and to move forward, in particular because of the specialized training that we already have and the amount of equipment investment that we have in physical machinery and things that we use in support of the current industry. If the industry does not come back in a moderate amount of time, then that particular equipment can get outdated and other such. And so there's a lot of financial restraints and the need for specialized training for people that are coming in. It's going to be interesting. I personally don't think that I'm most concerned about the over-legislation of going forward, of the industries in particular. The economics of the concert industry has been built on ticket sales and on bodies being in the buildings. If you don't have enough bodies, you just don't have the economics. So there's no way that you can shred that to 20-30% of what the capacity that it used to be. Which is the way that a lot of lawmakers seem to be talking about it. And if that happens, then that industry would be completely demolished. So I think that the biggest concern for me is the over-legislating of things and getting people back going. We have to be very careful that we understand that this is a blip in the road, that viruses happen, things will happen, and we'll get past this.
Yeah, I mean, truly, viruses happen. I mean, this seems like it's, you know, whether justified or not, it's definitely the biggest situation I've ever seen in my lifetime. Viruses happen. Worldwide lockdowns, not quite as often. But I think, you know, when you talk about over legislation or legislation at all, you want to see policy changes that help business people without trampling our rights or trampling, you know, our environment or whatever. But I get the feeling you're referring to AB5 here in California that even before the pandemic was a huge sort of challenge, you know, because of so many workers that like yourself, you know, production people, but also, you know, the hairstylists, the makeup artists, the photographers, all of those people that work freelance, so to speak, or work for themselves, or people that run companies that use those people. You know, even in my own company, Yay Productions, I use, you know, videographers and makeup artists and grips and all kinds of people. And now I might have to make those people employees, which means I I can't do it. Is that part of what you're referring to? And what would be the fix?
I do believe that that's part of it. I think that AB 5 is an interesting bill. It was written with some good intentions, but it's also overstepped somewhat. I think that you have to step back and look at how some more of that classification. If you look at employees, for example, there's been a big thing in our industry, whether you want to be on W-2 or you want to be a 1099 employee.
Right.
Do you want to be employed or do you want to be, independent? Well, if you're W-2, technically one of the only advantages is that they can take taxes ahead of time so you don't get yourself in trouble, and that you can receive unemployment in the event that you're ever unemployed.
And for many people, health benefits, that if your company is one that provides that.
Well, that's the tricky part. So most of the payroll companies, most of the artists go through a couple payroll services. There's Team Tours and there's New Payroll Associates, which are the two largest, I believe, in the country. They don't provide any health care benefits. They don't provide any 401k benefits. They only are simply payroll companies. So although you work for an artist, you technically, the company of record is these two payroll companies.
Right. And it's like for actors, entertainment partners. I mean, there's a million little W-2s I get for a few bucks for my residuals. Then they don't come with benefits.
Well, they don't. And they're also not, these companies aren't applying for the federal aid to cover these W-2 based employees. We're W-2 based employees just like a normal company is, and would fall under the small benefits, the small business, SBA Benefits Association guidelines, but they're not applying for us. They're only applying for their staff. So we can't apply for ourselves because we're not the actual owner of the company. So if you flip it over and say, okay, well, I'll go 1099, even though you pay your own payroll taxes, which is almost 15% higher than if you took a W-2, you're still not entitled to unemployment. And then you have to carry your own insurance and other things. So there's a catch-22 just about how people are getting paid in the industry altogether. That has to be addressed, and this has been an ongoing problem for many, many years. It's only been exacerbated by the current epidemic and the fact that people are having a lot of trouble getting unemployment benefits and other resources.
Right, because during the pandemic, there's been a special program where 1099 employees, a lot of the people that normally wouldn't get unemployment, like barbers and such, can get it, but it's been really difficult to get it. And I know, quite a few in the industry who one little residual check has stopped them from being able to get unemployment, even though they're primarily 1099. It's just a big mess. And it seems like the pandemic has made it even bigger. And it's almost, it points to one of the things it points to is we do need portable health care. That means, honestly, for me, it's Bernie Sanders. We should have Medicare for all. That's where I go with it. But somehow the fact that you have to have a W-2 to have unemployment, and I don't know quite what the solution is, but we're not there yet.
No, not at all. I think that that's very true. Why medical insurance is tied to employment doesn't make much sense. Either you need it all the time or you don't need it all the time. If you need it all the time, then it should be a permanent thing.
Right.
So
however it's administered.
It doesn't make sense.
Certainly a pandemic points out the weaknesses in the system. I think we have J.C. Watts back online, and it segues back into right where we were when we lost you for a moment there, which is what is the role of policy? We were talking about AB 5 here in California. That's been really challenging. I think there's been dozens of amendments to it already and still not done. What can we do from a policy perspective to support the survival of black businesses in particular and businesses, independent businesses in general? You're talking about black businesses being primarily sole proprietorships. Most of them have very few employees, if any at all. And what can we do, from a legislative or policy perspective that doesn't make things worse, but that does sort of help us to reemerge from this pandemic on good footing.
Yeah. Well, Dominique, I think, usually when we have crisis usually doesn't tell us what we are. It tells us what we are not. And I think in this crisis, we have seen our processes exposed. We've seen them be exposed to the weaknesses and the shortcomings in the system. I think I just heard you all talking about how some of the 1099s, even W-2s, are applying for unemployment, and they've applied for it, but they've not gotten it. And it's been well over 2 months since some of the people have employed or have made application. That highlights a weakness. That tells us what we are not. We are not prepared for these type of pandemics. And you don't buy an umbrella when it's raining. You buy an umbrella before it rains so that you can be prepared for it. And again, I think it's highlighted that our system is not prepared. And the least of these, those who are at the lower rung of the ladder, they're the ones that's going to bear the brunt of the weakness or the inappropriateness of the system. That's the reality of it until you strengthen the system. I've worked with the California Black Chamber to kind of help get them in the mix to educate their membership on how to take advantage of the unemployment benefits, the PPP funds, the small business loans, et cetera. And one of the things I've highlighted over the last month and a half, 2 months, is to say that small businesses that take advantage of these PPP loans or those benefits, make sure that you keep good records, because at the end of the day, if you're dealing with the government, I've seen the government come in and in the middle of the game change the rules of the game. So make sure that if you make an application and you receive those funds, make sure that you use them appropriately and that you keep good records so that grant does not turn into a loan.
Yeah, it's a great point. Okay, so Phil Strong, it's not like you're, some struggling entertainment company. I mean, you work with Mariah Carey, you work with Common, you work with top names in the industry. How will entertainment companies, especially in the production space where you are, how will you be able to reinvent? What do you see? What does the future hold for those of us that are in the entertainment space?
Well, in the short term, of course, everyone's running to streaming and trying to figure out how to utilize the current audiovisual technology that's available for them to put on concerts virtually. The challenge, there's some technical challenges there, as everybody has seen with the Versus thing with Swiss Beats and Timbaland, where certain things just are not built for what we're trying to do yet. And then at the end of the day, whether I'm performing a concert for 20 people or 10,000 people, there's still a variety of technical things that have to happen, and there's still bodies and equipment and people that have to be delivered. So it's a challenge to get everything kind of in line with all the restrictions that are still going on. So the pivot is definitely towards streaming, but then there's a challenge of how to monetize it. Just 2 nights ago, Twitch, which was one of the main DJ platforms for entertainers, came down hard on all of the DJs. After the last 2 months, 60 days of letting people spin openly, they shut down all the DJs and are no longer allowing them to rebroadcast their live performances. So the industry is already pushing back. Going forward, it's going to be very interesting. The plan that has been put forth for a lot of people this year is to kind of disprove the economic theories that the legislators are trying to put in place. And basically, there's some drive-in concerts and other things that are being proposed, social distancing concerts, and the industry is kind of saying, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get ahead of this. We're going to do some of these and prove that they're not economically viable, so that we can go back to legislators and say, hey, if you legislate us in this way, we will not be able to continue to do business. So that's kind of where the industry is going in the short term, because ultimately it's built on scale and economics, and you have to have the scale. So there's some big challenges ahead in this industry, and then the re-education of the industry in some of the new technological areas will be key.
Well, J.C. Watts and Phil Strong, I want to thank you both so much for being with us this morning. Mr. Watts, how can we watch the Black News Channel?
We are, Dominique, on Spectrum. They're in the Los Angeles area and several different parts of California. We are on Xfinity One with Comcast. We are on different OTT platforms. Roku, Zumo will be on Vizio, and several others toward the end of probably about the middle to the end of June. But there in your area, we're on Spectrum, and you can catch us there. And hope that folks will tune in and see culturally specific content or content that is culturally specific to the African American community.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. We continue our conversation right after this. Radio Free 102.3 KJLH.